Welcome back to The Breakdown with me, NLW. It's a daily podcast on macro, Bitcoin, and the big picture power shifts remaking our world. What's going on, guys? It is Friday, June 13th, and a hell of a Friday the 13th it is. Before we get into that, however, if you are enjoying The Breakdown, please go subscribe to it, give it a rating, give it a review, or if you want to dive deeper into the conversation, come join us on the Breakers Discord. You can find a link in the show notes or go to bit.ly/breakdownpod. All right, friends. As you will see today, I am not with Scott Melker. Obviously, I am traveling right now, and I think Scott might have been as well. We will be back, I presume, next week with our normal Friday 5, but for now, I am going to do my own Friday 5, still in the format, and we have to kick it off, obviously, with the Tehran strikes from Israel. Now, of course, I will not be getting into the politics or geopolitics of this, although if anyone wants to have that conversation with me, I would love to as someone who lived in the Middle East for a very long time. But we're going to be coming at it from the standpoint of markets and Bitcoin. In any case, if you for some reason haven't been watching, last night saw a serious escalation in the Middle East as Israel launched airstrikes on the Iranian capital. Details are still very sparse. The Israeli defense minister has announced a state of emergency and expects imminent retaliation after what he characterized as a set of preemptive strikes. There's reports and now Israeli claims of significant casualties among Iranian military leaders. Those details are still coming out. For now, the big takeaway is that this is a major escalation and could absolutely, easily, and perhaps most likely spiral into a broader regional hot war. The strike comes days after Trump administration officials were set to meet with Iranian leadership to discuss the terms of a nuclear deal. We're certainly seeing the war hawks in Washington chomping at the bit, with Lindsey Graham tweeting, "Game on, pray for Israel." Trump's statement about this on Truth Social reads, "I gave Iran chance after chance to make a deal. I told them in the strongest of words to just do it, but no matter how hard they tried, no matter how close they got, they just couldn't get it done. I told them it would be much worse than anything they know, anticipated, or were told, that the United States makes the best and most lethal military equipment in the world by far, and that Israel has a lot of it with much more to come, and they know how to use it." Certain Iranian hardliners spoke bravely, but they didn't know what was about to happen. They are all dead now, and it will only get worse. There has already been great death and destruction, but there is still time to make this slaughter, with the next already planned attacks being even more brutal, come to an end. Iran must make a deal before there is nothing left to save what was once known as the Iranian Empire. No more death, no more destruction. Just do it before it's too late. God bless you all. So perhaps leaving some room to come back to the table there, even as the entire country of Israel, backed by American munitions, is the stick to go along with that carrot. Now, as I said, it's far from the most important aspect of this conflict, but this is a Bitcoin and macro show, and analyzing the impact on financial markets is worth a note. The first response is that crypto assets have been crushed. Bitcoin was down as much as 4.5% overnight, falling below 103,000. Ethereum saw a 10% hit, and longer-tail altcoins had an equally strong response. There's an element of this that's simply about Bitcoin being one of the largest liquid markets that's open 24/7. Fund managers that need to get risk off their books overnight can always sell Bitcoin. S&P 500 futures followed a similar path downwards, while gold saw a 1% uptick. Oil is surging higher, now above $70 per barrel for the first time since April. So for the moment at least, we're seeing Bitcoin perform as a high volatility risk asset rather than as a safe haven. This was the same that played out last October when Iran launched ballistic missiles on Tel Aviv. That strike saw around a 10% drop in Bitcoin's price across multiple days. So that weekend might have been the last time we'll ever see Bitcoin trading at 60,000, with a huge bounce back over the following weeks. That rally happened out of sync with risk markets, leading many to believe that Bitcoin was performing as a safe haven during global turmoil. For those paying attention inside the crypto sector, however, there were confounding factors. That was the week that Binance began converting billions worth of stablecoins into Bitcoin. What mattered, though, was that the narrative on Wall Street was that Bitcoin was benefiting from a flight to safety on fear of World War III breaking out, which seemed to lend credence to BlackRock's sales pitch that Bitcoin acts as a hedge against geopolitical uncertainty. We're back in that same position, but BlackRock and other wealth management firms have now authorized their investment advisors to offer Bitcoin exposure to clients. So how will this play out? Will Bitcoin continue to behave as a risk asset, or will it shift back into this role as a safe haven? We will know a lot more over the next couple of days. Second in our solo version of the Friday 5 has to be, of course, SEC Chairman Paul Atkins calling self-custody a foundational American value. This came from a speech all the way back on Monday, which honestly could be one of the most important so far during this administration. Atkins said, "The right to have self-custody to one's private property is a foundational American value that should not disappear when one logs onto the internet." On Tuesday, we covered how important self-custody has been in the regulatory battles around crypto. It was one of the first issues that really brought crypto folks to Washington back in 2020 when then Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin tried to ban what he called unhosted wallets. Throughout the Gensler years, there was a belief that if the crypto lobby can defend self-custody, then it could defend against everything else as well. The political battle was such a unifying force that it even changed the language around wallets. Crypto people universally began calling them self-hosted wallets, asserting that self-custody is normal and shouldn't be defined by a lack of a third-party middleman, i.e. it was no more suspicious than having cash in your pocket. And that's what made Atkins' speech so important. For the first time, we have a regulatory official not only accepting that people want to self-custody, but defining it as a digital right. At the same time, we're seeing the right to self-custody inserted into the market structure bill as an amendment. While the US has always had strong protections around property rights, those haven't transferred to the digital age. We've seen legislation like the Bank Secrecy Act and the Patriot Act chip away at digital freedoms to the point that most young people think that there's nothing strange about forfeiting your rights as soon as you log on. Outside of the US, the erosion of digital freedoms has been even more severe. Atkins' speech could be one mark that the pendulum is swinging back in the other direction. Self-custody is also an extremely crucial part of putting together a crypto-based financial system. It's the key part that makes DeFi an interesting upgrade over traditional financial rails. It also shifts the balance of power away from middlemen and makes asset confiscation a much less effective policy option. Atkins' speech was, yes, about these benefits, but the striking part was the assertion of digital rights. He wasn't talking about self-custody just as the feature that makes crypto work. He was talking about self-custody as a fundamental digital right that makes American society work. Today's episode of The Breakdown is brought to you exclusively by Grayscale. Grayscale is almost certainly a name you know. They've been offering exposure to crypto for over a decade now and offer over 20 different crypto investment products ranging from single asset to diversified to thematic exposure to crypto and the broader crypto industry. They have long been innovators at the intersection of TradFi and crypto, and one of the benefits for a lot of us is that Grayscale products are available right through your existing brokerage or IRA. Now, of course, investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. For more information and important disclosures, visit grayscale.com. Go to grayscale.com to explore their full suite of crypto investment products and invest in your share of the future. Number 3 today. And shifting over to stablecoins, which continue to be the hottest trend of this cycle, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that we could all be underestimating how much stablecoin adoption will follow the passage of legislation. Earlier in the year, the Treasury put forward an estimate that stablecoin market cap could reach $2 trillion within a few years. For reference, that's 8 times where we are today. During a congressional hearing, however, Bessent said that while this was a reasonable number, he also believed that we could see the total greatly exceeding that. We already discussed on yesterday's show how the Treasury has adopted stablecoins as a weapon of dollar dominance and a way to drive demand for U.S. debt. But the other point is that Bessent probably isn't too far off in thinking that the stablecoin wave could end up much larger than we initially thought. Just this week, we've seen big stablecoin announcements from Société Générale in France, Bank of America, Uber, and Shopify, along with dozens of smaller entities. Just yesterday, it was reported that the DTCC, which clears every financial market trade in the U.S., is developing a stablecoin. That organization is primarily interested in stablecoins for cross-border financial settlement, but their commentary on the subject is basically that the infrastructure is simply better than the legacy system. For many years, the running joke in the industry has been that we're building the future of finance, but this is actually what that looks like in practice. There is now a recognition that crypto rails are much cheaper and more efficient than the legacy system. We're watching legislation get passed at the same time as crypto infrastructure is reaching maturity. That seems to be a recipe for explosive adoption. I think Bessent is right. I think the stablecoin market cap not only could exceed $2 trillion, but is fairly likely to. Fast forward a few years and it could be entirely commonplace for a normal person to be doing their banking using stablecoins. Now, there are some big implications for that level of stablecoin adoption. There's a question of whether the U.S. Treasury market can actually support rapid demand for the few additional $1 trillion in debt to back new launch stablecoins. There's a question of what it means to have crypto narrow banking become the dominant force of finance in the U.S. There's a big geopolitical question of whether large currency blocks like Europe are just going to sit back as digital dollars proliferate. But for now, it looks like stablecoin adoption is set to be a massive story for the coming years. Number 4 is Stripe acquiring Privy. One of the big signals that stablecoin adoption is no joke was Stripe's billion-dollar acquisition of Bridge last year. That set the dominant internet-based payment provider up to accept stablecoins and migrate their service to stablecoin rails. This week, we saw Stripe acquire a wallet startup called Privy. Privy doesn't make their own wallets. Instead, they function as a wrapper to let other services host integrated wallets on websites and apps. This was a huge use case during the NFT boom, when Privy allowed OpenSea to host their own wallet on the site. It meant that newcomers could buy an NFT using cash in bank accounts without ever really needing to touch crypto rails if they didn't want to. With this new partnership, Stripe is bringing the same functionality to their ecosystem, which could have some massive implications. Let's start with just the business accounts. A lot of people are paying attention to Stripe not as a payments provider, but as a dollar-denominated online bank for small and medium businesses across the globe. Shifting that service from centralized accounts onto crypto rails is a huge improvement for customers. It means that if Stripe is providing an account to a business in a politically unstable nation, they can legitimately claim they have no access to funds. This can all be achieved in a self-custodial manner without businesses needing to figure out how to use private keys due to Privy's account abstraction features. The same could be said for personal accounts. Privy also allows these wallets to be integrated into APIs, so developers can access them in the same way they access Stripe for current services. Fundamentally, this is fintech making the jump from the legacy systems onto crypto infrastructure. Stripe will now be able to run their entire service across crypto rails, only integrating with banks as an on- and off-ramp. The acquisition reinforces that Stripe isn't just adding stablecoin support, but re-architecting their service around stablecoins. Lastly today, number 5 is the Clarity Act and Genius Act, still positively moving through Congress. For crypto lawmakers in Congress, this felt like a surprisingly quiet week considering how much happened. The Senate stablecoin bill, known as the Genius Act, was approved in a second cloture vote and will go to a floor vote on Tuesday. The House market structure bill, known as the Clarity Act, sailed through dual committee votes to move on to a floor vote. The anti-crypto army was, of course, out in force. The House Financial Services Committee hearing took over 10 hours due to complaints about Trump's crypto businesses. And in the Senate, we had hours of debate on the same topic, with Elizabeth Warren firing up her letter writing once again. But honestly, the opposition looked pretty impotent. Just a few weeks ago, it seemed like the anti-crypto Democrats had re-seized the momentum. Trump's crypto scandals were all over the news, but now the news cycle is focused elsewhere. The resistance to passing common sense legislation has faded, and just doesn't seem to have the gas anymore. Enough Senate Democrats still support the Genius Act, and in the House there wasn't enough opposition to stop the Clarity Act from moving out of committee. More than that, the complaints are starting to feel a little half-baked. As I've said for months, I think there's genuine bipartisan support to pass legislation against Trump or any other leader having more questionable crypto activities. Banning lawmakers from trading stocks is an 86% issue in polling with equal support on both sides. The same is probably true regarding the president's meme coin and stablecoin ventures. These bills aren't the place for it. If crypto ends up being the new market infrastructure for the US, then we gotta have these stable, well-thought-out rules. That was the big takeaway for this week for crypto in Congress for me. The anti-crypto army can beat the same old drum as long as they want, but for right now, everything seems to be going full steam ahead. And that, friends, is going to do it for this solo version of the Friday 5. Appreciate you listening as always, and until next time, be safe and take care of each other. Peace.